On March 15, 2024, the vault alarm shrieked as Michael Harris pressed an injured hand against the cold steel door. Outside, sirens wailed. Police surrounded the building. His backpack, bulging with $2 million, felt leaden as the building's lockdown sealed every exit. The digital keypad beside him flashed angry red error messages. His carefully planned 7-minute window had collapsed. The duplicate keycard, months in the making, hung useless. How had 6 months of meticulous surveillance led to this? Every detail was memorized, yet he was trapped. Michael clutched the backpack, the small cut on his palm dripping blood onto the floor, a trail sealing his fate. This perfect crime had become a perfect nightmare. On the morning of August 3, 2023, 6 months earlier, Michael Harris had driven the same bus route for 7 years without ever considering himself a criminal. The downtown terminal buzzed with early morning activity as he pulled his city bus into position. Regular passengers climbed aboard with their familiar faces and predictable routines. At exactly 6:19 a.m. on August 3rd, the Southern Trust Bank employees boarded at Fifth Avenue. Michael recognized each of them after years of daily observation. Their conversations had become background noise until financial desperation sharpened his attention to every detail. Marcus Thompson, the head security supervisor, settling into his regular seat behind the driver, complained that the vault maintenance had gotten delayed again. He added that these new digital systems caused more problems than the old manual locks ever did. His colleague Sarah Martinez nodded while juggling her coffee cup and employee keycard, remarking that at least they still had the backup manual codes for emergencies. She admitted, though, that she always forgot if the sequence was 741263 or 714263 for the main vault. Marcus corrected automatically, stating that it was 741263, the same combination they had used for 3 years now. He mentioned the bank manager kept threatening to change it, but implied she knew how that usually went. Michael's hands remained steady on the steering wheel, but his mind, on this August 3rd morning, recorded every word. 7 years of driving this route had filled his memory with thousands of such conversations. Banking procedures, security protocols, personal complaints about workplace policies, all of it cataloged unconsciously until this moment. At 6:41 a.m., Michael watched Sarah swipe her keycard at the bank's employee entrance. The magnetic strip caught the morning sunlight as she struggled with her coffee and purse. The reinforced door remained open for exactly 7 seconds after her entry, a timing Michael had unconsciously noted hundreds of times before. That evening, August 3rd, Michael sat in his cramped apartment reviewing the day's observations. His mother's medical bills covered every surface of his kitchen table: chemotherapy treatments, prescription medications, specialist consultations. The costs were overwhelming his bus driver's salary. Bankruptcy loomed like a storm cloud over his future. For the first time in his law-abiding life, Michael began considering alternatives to honest work. The idea crystallized on August 10, 2023, during Michael's 2:15 p.m. lunch break at Rosie's Cafe. Sarah Martinez sat 2 tables away, her employee keycard hanging visibly from her purse strap. The plastic rectangle seemed to glow with possibility as Michael studied its magnetic strip and barcode design. Creating a duplicate would require specialized equipment, but the internet offered solutions to any technical challenge. Michael spent that August 10th evening researching magnetic stripe technology, card duplication methods, and security bypass techniques. The information was surprisingly accessible to anyone with patience and determination. By midnight on August 10th, Michael had identified the equipment he would need: a portable magnetic stripe reader, blank cards with matching specifications, and software to process the captured data. The total cost would be $800. Money he didn't have but could obtain by selling his few valuable possessions. Sleep came slowly that night as Michael wrestled with the magnitude of what he was contemplating. 24 hours ago, he had been an honest bus driver struggling with financial problems. Now he was researching techniques for major felonies, but his mother's medical bills demanded desperate measures. It was August 17, 2023, precisely 10:30 a.m., when Michael Harris experienced his first truly humbling moment in his descent into criminal planning. His initial attempt to acquire a crucial piece of equipment, a magnetic stripe reader, culminated not in success, but in a wave of acute embarrassment. He had walked into Technomax Electronics, a brightly lit store filled with the latest gadgets, trying to project an air of casual confidence he certainly didn't feel. However, the salesperson, a young man with sharp, observant eyes, quickly homed in on him. The clerk's inquiries about Michael's intended use for the device were delivered with a distinct and growing note of suspicion. The young man pointed out, his voice neutral but his gaze unwavering, that most individuals purchasing such readers typically had entirely legitimate business applications in mind. He listed examples like systems for credit card processing, creating membership cards, or even for detailed inventory tracking within a company. Then, leaning slightly forward, he had inquired quite directly about Michael's specific purpose for the device. Michael, caught off guard by the directness, felt a flush creep up his neck. He had prepared an explanation, a vague story about initiating a small business venture, perhaps something involving loyalty cards for a non-existent local cafe. But as the words left his mouth that August 17th morning, they sounded flimsy and unconvincing, even to his own ears. He could hear the slight stammer, the lack of concrete details, and he saw the clerk's skepticism deepen. The air in the store suddenly felt thick and judgmental. He mumbled a hasty retreat, leaving Technomax Electronics empty-handed. The bright sunlight outside felt like a spotlight on his failure. He walked several blocks, the shame burning, realizing with a sinking feeling that his amateurish approach to criminal planning required a significant and immediate overhaul. He needed to be smarter, more prepared, if he was to navigate this dangerous new world. Just 3 days later, on what would have been August 20th, 2023, Michael decided to try a different, more calculated approach. He had spent the intervening time rehearsing a new story, adding layers of plausibility. This time he visited Downtown Electronics, a smaller, somewhat less imposing establishment. He confidently stated that he was purchasing the reader on behalf of his employer for a supposed upgrade to their existing inventory management system. His story was more detailed, more confident this time around. He explained to Eddie Rodriguez, the amiable owner of the store, that his fictional company frequently tracked valuable equipment movement between various job sites. He elaborated, suggesting that the magnetic stripes on the equipment tags were essential for helping them maintain precise and accurate records, minimizing loss and improving efficiency. He even invented a few plausible-sounding technical requirements. Eddie, a man who seemed to take people at their word, listened patiently. He demonstrated the device Michael was interested in without a hint of suspicion. He showed Michael how to connect it, how to swipe a card, and how the captured data could be stored or transferred. The reader itself was surprisingly compact, easily small enough to be concealed within a jacket pocket, and it appeared simple enough to operate with only minimal practice. Michael felt a small surge of relief. When it came time to pay, Michael opted for cash, explaining smoothly that his company preferred to avoid the minor inconvenience and processing fees associated with credit card transactions. Eddie Rodriguez accepted this explanation without a second thought, completing the sale with a friendly smile and a cheerful wish for Michael to have a good day. As Michael walked home later that August 20th, the device carefully hidden within his backpack, he felt the undeniable weight of his commitment to this perilous path. There was a grim satisfaction in having overcome this first hurdle, but it was heavily tainted by the ever-present fear of the enormous risks he was taking. Then came August 24th, 2023, around 12:45 p.m. Michael's meticulously crafted plan to scan Sarah Martinez's employee keycard at Rosie's Cafe nearly unraveled catastrophically before it even truly began. He had arrived at the cafe earlier than usual, selecting a corner table that offered a clear, unobstructed view of Sarah's typical seating area. He watched the entrance, his nerves thrumming. When Sarah finally entered, juggling her purse and a takeout coffee cup, and placed her purse on the adjacent chair as she usually did, Michael's heart sank. He noticed immediately that the key card, his primary target, was not clipped to the strap as it often was. Instead, it was tucked much deeper into a zippered compartment of her bag than he had ever seen it before. This was an unexpected complication. As Sarah made her way to the counter to place her order, her back momentarily turned. Michael saw his narrow window of opportunity. He moved quickly, trying to appear casual as he approached her table. His hands, slick with nervous sweat, carefully unzipped the small pocket. He extracted the key card, his fingers fumbling slightly. But then, disaster struck at the most crucial moment imaginable. The magnetic stripe reader, the very device he had gone to such lengths to acquire, malfunctioned. Its small display screen flashed a series of frustrating error messages: read error, no data, check connection, while precious, irreplaceable seconds ticked away with agonizing slowness. Michael frantically pressed the reset button, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He could see Sarah out of the corner of his eye. She had collected her order and was beginning to turn back towards her table. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded his senses. In a moment of pure desperation, he abandoned the attempt with the faulty scanner. Instead, he quickly, almost instinctively, used his phone to photograph both sides of the keycard, hoping the images would be clear enough. He then tried to slide it back into the zippered pocket, aiming for the exact position he had found it in. Just as he was withdrawing his hand, Sarah's voice, sharp and laced with surprise, cut through Michael's intense concentration like a sudden cold blade. She inquired, her tone shifting rapidly from simple confusion to growing alarm about what exactly he was doing so close to her purse. She stood just 3 feet away, her coffee cup held precariously, her eyes fixed on him and then on her bag. Michael's mind raced, sifting through a dozen potential explanations in a fraction of a second, finally settling on the one he hoped was the most plausible, the least incriminating. He forced himself to remain outwardly calm, holding up the keycard as if it were a perfectly normal thing to be handling. He stated, his voice steadier than he felt, that he was very sorry for the intrusion. He explained, trying to sound helpful, that the card had apparently fallen out when she had sat down, and he was simply in the process of putting it back into her purse for her. He hoped his expression conveyed innocent concern. Sarah's eyes narrowed perceptibly as she examined his face more carefully, her gaze lingering. He could see the suspicion warring with a desire to believe his simple explanation. After a long, uncomfortable pause, she uttered a hesitant, "Oh," her voice still uncertain. Then she added a tentative expression of thanks, though her tone lacked genuine gratitude, remarking that she supposed it was all right. Michael handed her the card, their fingers brushing briefly, and returned to his own table, acutely feeling her suspicious gaze following his every movement. For the remainder of her lunch break on that tense August 24th, Sarah kept glancing nervously in his direction. She was clearly unsettled, perhaps even frightened by the strange encounter. That single fraught incident irrevocably changed the entire dynamic of Michael's plan. His carefully guarded anonymity was now compromised. Sarah Martinez would undoubtedly remember his face if questioned by authorities about any future security breaches at the bank. The stakes had just become significantly higher. Despite the serious complications arising from the unnerving encounter at the cafe, by the evening of August 31st, 2023, around 8:20 p.m., Michael found himself pushing forward with the creation of the duplicate keycard. The near miss had shaken him, but his mother's deteriorating condition and the ever-mounting pile of medical bills were a constant, relentless pressure. The photographs he had managed to take with his phone, though captured in haste, provided sufficient visual detail for him to attempt a physical replication of the card's design and layout. However, he still critically needed the magnetic data from the stripe itself for the duplicate to grant functional access to the bank. A card that merely looked like Sarah's was useless. His subsequent online research, conducted in the late hours of many sleepless nights, revealed a crucial piece of information. Many employee keycards, especially older systems, utilize standard encoding formats. These formats, he learned, could often be reverse-engineered, at least partially, from a careful visual analysis of the card's physical appearance, coupled with some educated guesswork about common data structures. Michael spent countless hours hunched over his small kitchen table, minutely studying the enlarged images of Sarah's card on his laptop screen. He painstakingly identified the subtle patterns, the placement of specific data fields, and the likely encoding schemes embedded within the magnetic stripe, comparing them to examples he found online. Using specialized software, which he had downloaded with a sense of trepidation from obscure hacker forums, Michael began the arduous process of creating a working duplicate on a blank card he had purchased online from an anonymous vendor. The process was far from straightforward. It required multiple frustrating attempts, endless tweaking of parameters, and a considerable amount of technical learning on his part. He learned about track data, coercivity, and start and end sentinels, a whole new illicit vocabulary. But eventually, through sheer persistence and a growing, albeit uncomfortable, technical aptitude, by late in the evening on August 31st, he produced a replica that he believed was convincing, both visually and, more importantly, electronically. The true test came when he nervously tried the duplicate on his own apartment building's magnetic door lock, which used a similar, though less sophisticated, technology. He held his breath as he swiped it. The small green light on the reader flashed, and the lock clicked open smoothly. Relief washed over him, potent and immediate. The card had activated the mechanism without any issues, suggesting with a hopeful degree of certainty that it would function properly on the Southern Trust Bank's more advanced security system. Michael's confidence, which had been severely battered by the cafe incident, began to grow again, piece by piece, as each daunting technical challenge was painstakingly overcome through hours of patient research and trial and error. August was drawing to a close, and he felt he was, despite the setbacks, making dangerous progress. Beginning on September 7, 2023, with a functional duplicate keycard now in his possession, Michael shifted his focus. He started conducting highly detailed, methodical surveillance of Southern Trust Bank's daily operations. This phase required a new level of commitment and risk. He subtly adjusted his bus route timing, sometimes arriving a few minutes early, other times lingering a bit longer at the stop nearest the bank, all to allow himself extended observation periods near the building's less conspicuous employee entrance. He had to be careful not to arouse suspicion from his dispatchers or regular passengers. His observations quickly revealed that the security guards, while present, maintained highly predictable schedules that presented notable weaknesses. He discovered that at precisely 9:30 a.m. every single weekday, both guards assigned to the morning shift would exit through the bank's main front entrance for their designated smoking break. The duration of this break was remarkably consistent, almost always 7 minutes, rarely varying by more than a few seconds. During this brief window, he noted, the employee entrance, located on a quieter side street, appeared to remain unmonitored from inside the building, at least by human eyes. Michael meticulously timed their absence with the stopwatch function on his phone over multiple days throughout early September. He'd sit in his bus, pretending to check his schedule, or stand near a newsstand across the street, feigning interest in a paper, all while his eyes were fixed on the bank and his thumb was ready on the timer. The routine of the guards never varied by more than 30 seconds. This consistency strongly suggested to him that it was an established, ingrained habit, perhaps an unofficial but tolerated practice, rather than random, unpredictable behavior. This 7-minute window became the cornerstone of his evolving plan. During this intensive surveillance period in September, Michael also diligently noted other critical details. He carefully mapped the positions of all visible external security cameras, looking for potential blind spots or angles that offered less coverage. He observed the general flow of foot traffic around the building at different times of the day, noting when the streets were busiest and when they were relatively deserted. He also paid close attention to the arrival patterns of various bank employees, trying to discern any routines or predictable movements that might be relevant. Each piece of information, no matter how small it seemed, was mentally cataloged, cross-referenced, and stored away for future reference, forming a detailed mental blueprint of the bank's external vulnerabilities. Then, on September 14, 2023, around 11:45 a.m., an entirely unexpected and unwelcome encounter nearly derailed Michael's painstaking surveillance efforts and threatened to expose his entire operation. He was positioned across the street from Southern Trust Bank, blending in with a few other pedestrians. His attention focused on timing the guard's mid-morning routine when a familiar, booming voice suddenly called out his name from behind him, the speaker wondering aloud if it was indeed Michael Harris. Michael froze, his blood turning to ice. He turned slowly, a forced neutral expression on his face, to see Danny Kowalski approaching him with a wide, enthusiastic, and entirely unwelcome grin. Danny had been a classmate of Michael's some 15 years ago, though Michael hadn't seen or thought of him in years. Time, it appeared, had not been particularly kind to Danny. His expanding waistline strained noticeably against the buttons of his shirt, and his receding hairline was rather poorly concealed by an old, faded baseball cap. Danny continued, his voice far too loud for the relatively quiet street, exclaiming that it had been an incredibly long time, inevitably drawing attention from several nearby pedestrians who glanced over curiously. Danny then inquired, his grin unwavering, about what on earth could bring Michael Harris, of all people, to the heart of the financial district. Michael forced a casual, dismissive smile while his mind raced, frantically calculating how to minimize this highly unwelcome interaction and extract himself from the situation as quickly as possible. He replied vaguely that he was just waiting for someone, adding a non-committal phrase about Danny surely understanding how such things were, hoping that would be the end of it. But Danny, his eyes gleaming with the desperate, almost manic enthusiasm of someone clearly starved for social connection, pressed on. He asked if Michael was still driving the city buses, mentioning that he had heard through the grapevine that Michael was working some of the downtown routes these days. Before Michael could formulate a polite deflection, Danny enthusiastically suggested that they should definitely grab drinks sometime to catch up on old times and reminisce. Michael, feeling increasingly trapped and anxious, replied with a non-committal agreement, already beginning to subtly back away from the conversation. He added, as a delaying tactic, that he should get Danny's contact information. As Danny, beaming with pleasure, enthusiastically recited his phone number on that tense mid-September day, Michael's attention was split. He noticed, with a surge of panic, the two security guards returning from their smoking break, ambling back towards the bank's main entrance. His crucial surveillance window for the day was rapidly closing, and Danny's continued boisterous presence made any further useful observation utterly impossible. He was missing vital data, Michael quickly interjected, remarking that it had been great seeing Danny again, and turned to leave, hoping to make a clean break. Danny, however, called after him, his voice now tinged with an obvious and unwelcome curiosity, wanting to know who exactly Michael might be meeting at a bank anyway. The question, innocent on the surface, carried an undertone of suspicion that sent a fresh wave of ice through Michael's veins. It implied that meeting someone at a bank, for someone like Michael, was perhaps unusual or out of place. He didn't dare turn back or offer an answer. He just kept walking away quickly without responding, but he knew the damage was already done. Danny's loud voice and his persistent probing questions had undoubtedly attracted unwanted attention to Michael and his presence near the bank. He could feel the curious gazes of other pedestrians on his back. The question carried an undertone of suspicion that sent ice through Michael's veins. He walked away without responding, but the damage was already done. Danny's loud voice and persistent questions had attracted unwanted attention on September 14th. That evening, Michael seriously considered abandoning his entire plan. The risks were accumulating beyond his ability to control them. Despite the mounting complications, by September 21st, 2023, at 10:15 p.m., Michael's financial desperation pushed him forward. His mother's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and the medical bills had grown beyond any hope of legitimate payment. The bank robbery represented his only realistic path to financial salvation. Michael decided to accelerate his timeline, moving the planned heist from December to early October. Reduced preparation time meant higher risks, but continued surveillance increased the probability of additional unwelcome encounters, like the one with Danny earlier that month. He spent sleepless nights in late September reviewing every aspect of his plan. The duplicate keycard had been tested successfully on similar magnetic locks. The guard's smoking schedule was memorized down to the minute. The vault's location and access procedures were confirmed through overheard conversations. Michael prepared his equipment methodically: latex gloves to prevent fingerprint evidence, a compact LED flashlight for navigation in dark areas, wire cutters for any unexpected security measures, a plain black backpack to transport the stolen cash. On September 28th, Michael set his alarm for 4:30 a.m. The heist was scheduled for the following morning, timed to coincide with the guard's predictable absence. On October 1st, 2023, at 4:30 a.m., Michael's alarm buzzed through the pre-dawn darkness of his apartment. He rose immediately, his movements purposeful despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Dark clothing, latex gloves, and his equipment-filled backpack were prepared and waiting. At 5:12 a.m. on October 1st, Michael left through his building's rear exit to avoid the security cameras monitoring the main entrance. The October morning was crisp and clear, with empty streets except for early joggers and delivery vehicles beginning their routes. Michael approached Southern Trust Bank from the east side, using construction scaffolding on an adjacent office building to mask his approach from the main security cameras. At 9:25 a.m. on this October 1st morning, he positioned himself in a doorway with clear visibility of the bank's employee entrance. The familiar routine unfolded exactly as predicted. At 9:30 a.m., both security guards exited through the front entrance, already reaching for their cigarettes as they settled against the building's wall for their morning break. Michael checked his watch and began moving toward the employee entrance at 9:32 a.m. on October 1st. The duplicate keycard felt unnaturally warm in his gloved hand as he approached the magnetic reader. He swiped the card through the scanner and held his breath. The indicator light flashed red. At 9:33 a.m. on October 1st, Michael's heart stopped as the red light denied him access. He swiped the duplicate keycard again, pressing it more firmly against the reader. Red light. Panic flooded his nervous system as he realized something was wrong with his carefully prepared plan. Had Sarah reported the cafe incident? Had the bank changed their security protocols? Were the keycards programmed differently than he had researched? Footsteps approached from inside the building, growing louder with each passing second. Michael swiped the card a third time, his hand trembling with desperation. The light flickered between red and yellow, as if the system couldn't decide whether to grant access. Finally, on the fourth attempt, the indicator turned green and the lock clicked open with a satisfying mechanical sound. Michael slipped inside the building, his breathing rapid and shallow from the adrenaline surge. The hallway stretched ahead exactly as he had visualized during months of planning. Sterile white walls, fluorescent lighting, and security cameras positioned at regular intervals. He moved quickly toward the supply closet he had identified during his mental mapping of the building's layout. The door opened to reveal cleaning equipment and spare maintenance uniforms, providing perfect concealment for the next phase of his plan on this eventful October 1st. Crouched in the supply closet at 9:37 a.m. on October 1st, Michael listened intently for any sounds that might indicate his entry had been detected. The building's ventilation system hummed softly overhead, while distant voices carried from offices deeper in the structure. At 9:39 a.m., he heard the security guards returning from their smoking break. Their casual conversation faded as they moved away from the employee entrance toward their monitoring station in the building's interior. Michael waited an additional 3 minutes to ensure the corridor was clear before emerging from his hiding place. The hallway remained empty, confirming that his entry had gone unnoticed. The route to the vault stretched ahead like a tunnel leading to either fortune or catastrophe. Michael's footsteps echoed softly on the polished floor, despite his attempts at silent movement. Security cameras tracked his progress, but he knew they weren't actively monitored unless an alarm system triggered automatic recording. The vault door appeared at the corridor's end, a massive steel barrier flanked by both digital and manual security systems. Michael approached with careful deliberation, pulling out a small notebook to confirm the access code he had overheard during his surveillance. At 9:45 a.m. on October 1st, Michael stood before the vault's digital keypad, his gloved fingers poised over the numbered buttons. The code Sarah had mentioned months ago was burned into his memory, 741263. He entered the sequence carefully, double-checking each digit before proceeding to the next. The display processed his input for several long seconds before flashing a red denial message. Michael's pulse quickened as he tried again, entering the numbers more slowly. Red light. Had he misremembered the conversation? Were there multiple codes for different access levels? Panic crept into his thoughts as he attempted variations of the sequence. 714-263, 741-236, 714-632. Each attempt resulted in the same red denial, and after the fifth failed entry, the keypad emitted a soft warning beep and displayed a 15-second lockout timer. Michael forced himself to breathe steadily while the timer counted down. He mentally replayed every conversation he had overheard about vault access, searching for details he might have missed or misinterpreted from those August observations. Then he remembered. Marcus had corrected Sarah's initial sequence, but what if his correction had been wrong? Or what if there were multiple codes for different time periods? When the lockout expired, Michael entered the original number Sarah had mentioned before Marcus's correction, 714-623. The display flashed green, and the digital lock disengaged with a mechanical click. Michael's relief at solving the digital lock at 9:48 a.m. on October 1st was short-lived as he confronted the vault's secondary security measure. The manual lock still required Sarah's keycard for final access. He inserted the duplicate and turned it slowly, feeling the mechanism's resistance. The lock engaged properly, and Michael heard the satisfying click of success. The massive vault door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing the treasure that had motivated months of planning and preparation. Inside, stacks of currency were organized on metal shelving units with military precision. Bundles of hundreds, 50s, and 20s were neatly arranged and labeled according to denomination. Michael focused immediately on the $100 bills. Each bundle contained exactly $10,000, making them the most efficient choice for transport on this October 1st morning. He opened his backpack and began loading the cash with systematic efficiency. The first layer of bundles filled the lower compartment quickly. Michael zipped that section closed and began stacking additional bundles in the main area of the bag. The process was methodical and focused, his mind entirely concentrated on maximizing the available space. Each bundle was placed with precision to ensure optimal weight distribution and storage capacity. By 9:54 a.m. on October 1st, 2023, Michael's backpack contained approximately $2 million in cash. The weight was significant but manageable for a man of his physical condition. He took one final look around the vault interior, ensuring he hadn't left any obvious evidence of his presence. As Michael prepared to exit the vault and begin his planned escape route, disaster struck without warning. A piercing alarm suddenly shrieked through the building's internal communication system. Red warning lights began flashing along the corridor, while an automated voice announced that a security breach had been detected, and all personnel were to evacuate immediately, repeating that a security breach had been detected. Michael's confidence evaporated instantly. Had someone spotted him on the surveillance cameras? Had the keypad's multiple failed attempts triggered a delayed alarm system? Was this a random security drill, or had his presence been discovered? Heavy footsteps thundered through the building as staff members rushed toward designated evacuation points. Michael had planned for a silent escape during the guards' smoking break, not a building-wide emergency evacuation with security personnel actively searching for threats on this October 1 steam morning. The employee entrance would now be chaos, staff streaming out while security investigated the breach. Michael needed an alternative exit route, but his reconnaissance had focused entirely on the path he had originally planned to use. An authoritative voice shouted from the main corridor, instructing someone to check the vault area immediately, stating that the security breach had originated from that sector of the building. At 9:56 a.m. on October 1st, Michael's carefully planned escape route was completely compromised. Security guards were approaching his location while the building's lockdown protocols activated automatically. He gripped the backpack straps tighter and made a desperate decision. He would have to force his way through the evacuation chaos. Michael sprinted toward the employee entrance, hoping to blend with the stream of evacuating staff members. As he rounded the corner at full speed, he collided violently with a security guard rushing in the opposite direction. The impact sent both men sprawling across the polished floor. Cash bundles scattered from Michael's partially unzipped backpack, spreading green paper across the white tile like fallen leaves. The guard, a young man whose nameplate read Peterson, stared in shock at the money before scrambling for his radio. Peterson shouted into the communication device that the security breach was confirmed and that a suspect had been apprehended with stolen currency. Michael lunged forward desperately, grabbing Peterson's wrist to prevent him from completing the transmission. They struggled violently for control of the radio, their bodies crashing into the wall with brutal force. Peterson was younger and stronger, but Michael fought with the desperation of a man facing life imprisonment. During their struggle, Peterson's elbow struck Michael's face, splitting his lip and sending crimson drops spattering across the sterile white wall. Peterson grunted, telling Michael to let go of him, trying to wrench his arm free from Michael's grip. Michael pulled harder, and they both stumbled backward toward a fire safety station. Peterson's head struck the corner of a metal fire extinguisher housing with a sickening impact. He collapsed immediately, red fluid pooling beneath his motionless form. At 9:58 a.m. Michael stared in horror at the unconscious guard. He had never intended violence, but now a man lay motionless because of his criminal choices. The weight of the moment threatened to paralyze him completely. Sirens wailed outside the building, growing louder as emergency vehicles arrived. Michael stuffed the scattered cash back into his backpack and checked Peterson's pulse with trembling fingers. The rhythm was weak but steady. He was alive but seriously injured. Michael stumbled toward the employee entrance, his split lip dripping steadily. The keycard reader blinked red as the building's automatic lockdown protocols had been activated. He was trapped inside with an injured guard and approaching police officers. Through the entrance's reinforced glass doors, Michael could see patrol cars establishing a perimeter around the building. Officers were positioning themselves at all potential escape routes, while emergency medical vehicles blocked traffic in both directions. His meticulously planned exit strategy was completely worthless now, on this chaotic morning. Michael retreated deeper into the building at 10:02 a.m., searching desperately for alternative escape routes. A fire exit sign pointed toward the building's rear section, but using it would trigger additional alarms and immediately alert authorities to his exact location. In a janitorial supply room, Michael found cleaning uniforms and basic maintenance equipment. He quickly changed into the tan coveralls, hoping the disguise might provide precious minutes of confusion. The cash-filled backpack was hidden behind boxes of office supplies. Michael emerged from the supply room, trying to mimic the confused behavior of legitimately evacuated employees. He walked toward the main entrance with measured steps, his heart pounding against his ribs. A police officer announced through a megaphone that everyone needed to remain calm and orderly. He stated that they must account for all personnel before anyone left the building and instructed people to have their identification ready for verification. Michael's heart sank completely. They were checking identities against employee rosters and security databases. His improvised janitor disguise would collapse under any serious scrutiny. As Michael turned to retreat from the main entrance, a second alarm system activated, this one specifically designed to seal the building during confirmed security breaches. Heavy metal barriers began descending over all exits, triggered by Peterson's emergency radio signal. At 10:04 a.m., Michael dove toward the employee entrance, sliding desperately under the descending metal barrier. The steel edge caught his left shoulder, tearing through his stolen coveralls and raking across his back with razor-sharp force. Agony exploded through his body as he rolled clear of the barrier, but he forced himself to his feet, despite the pain. The red fluid soaking through his shirt was warm against his skin, but escape was now his absolute priority. Michael stumbled into the parking lot, clutching his wounded shoulder. Police officers were focused on the building's main entrance, providing temporary cover for his escape. He spotted a delivery truck idling near the rear parking area. The driver was probably trapped inside by the lockdown. Fighting through waves of pain and dizziness, Michael climbed into the truck's cab. The keys dangled from the ignition like a gift from fortune. He started the engine and drove slowly toward the parking lot exit, trying to appear like a routine delivery departure. An alert officer spotting the moving truck shouted to stop that vehicle and alerted others that someone was stealing the delivery truck. Michael pressed the accelerator, but the heavy vehicle was painfully slow to respond. In the rearview mirror, he watched officers scrambling toward their patrol cars. The chase was beginning, and his head start was measured in seconds on this fateful October 1st. By 10:15 a.m., Michael drove the stolen delivery truck through downtown Mobile's narrow streets, trying desperately to reach the industrial district where he had originally planned to change vehicles. Police sirens echoed behind him, growing louder as additional units joined the pursuit. The truck's maximum speed was completely inadequate for a high-speed chase. Michael took sharp turns through residential neighborhoods, hoping to lose pursuit in the maze of suburban streets. But the vehicle's size made stealth impossible, and his shoulder wound was affecting his ability to steer effectively. At a red traffic light, Michael made another desperate decision. He abandoned the truck and ran into a crowded shopping mall, hoping the chaos of panicked civilians would provide cover. The red trail from his shoulder wound marked his path clearly, but the confusion of frightened shoppers created temporary obstacles for pursuing officers. Mall security guards attempted to intercept him, but Michael's adrenaline-fueled desperation gave him strength to push through their efforts. At the mall's rear exit, additional police officers were already positioning themselves strategically. Michael was surrounded, wounded, and exhausted. The $2 million in stolen cash had been abandoned with the backpack inside Southern Trust Bank. At 10:25 a.m., Michael spotted a maintenance stairwell leading to the mall's upper level. He climbed desperately, leaving crimson handprints on the metal railings. His shoulder wound had reopened completely, and dizziness from fluid loss threatened to overwhelm his remaining strength. On the building's roof, Michael found himself completely trapped. Police helicopters circled overhead while officers secured all ground-level exits. There was literally nowhere left to run. As police breached the roof access door with tactical equipment, Michael stood at the building's edge, swaying from exhaustion and significant injury. The failed heist on October 1st had cost him everything: his freedom, his future, and nearly his life. After 2 days of trial on January 18, 2024, the jury found Michael guilty on all charges: armed robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, and possession of forged documents. During sentencing, Judge Rebecca Morrison addressed Michael, condemning his actions on October 1st for endangering lives, traumatizing the community, and causing lasting harm to Peterson. While acknowledging his financial duress, she emphasized it didn't justify the violence and meticulous planning. Michael was sentenced to 20 years for armed robbery, 15 for aggravated assault, and 10 for burglary, to run concurrently, with a minimum of 18 years before parole eligibility. The gavel sound sealed his fate, nearly 2 decades behind bars.